Moderator of this session this morning. The session is entitled Language, Lyrics, and Gender in the Dance Hall. And we have with us four presenters from a variety of backgrounds, from theology to sociology to a PhD candidate in cultural studies. We'll kick off with the presentation by Winston Campbell, titled The Collective Opus of Tommy Lee Sparta, A Theoretical Response. And just a brief introduction to Mr. Campbell. He's a PhD candidate in cultural studies here at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. He's researching Jamaican architectural development with a particular emphasis on Christian structures. I think that is where we get into the kinds of lyrical motions by Mr. Tommy Lee Sparta. I don't know where the architecture comes in there, but perhaps he'll tell us that. He's an active researcher on the cultural politics in Jamaican art and popular music, and has been presenting on these topics in various conferences. His presentation, I saw a piece of the abstract that struck me, and I think I'd like to share it with you. The fact that there's a new kid on the dance hall scene. I'm sure he will give you more on his emergence into the field, Tommy Lee Sparta, who in some sense is attempting to create a new space left by Vybz Kartel, who has caused some controversy in the dance hall. Tommy Lee has stirred up this controversy, and he can't go unnoticed by serious scholars of Jamaican culture, especially given the attention that the consumers of dancehall culture has given his music, as well as the philosophical and social, among other messages, that are embedded in his lyrics, antics, and the visualizations of his persona. Please help me welcome Mr. Campbell to give us more insights into Tommy Lee Sparta. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by thanking the organizers and volunteers and other workers who are responsible for putting this conference together. I also want to thank the members of our audience, albeit small thus far, for joining us for what I hope would be a stimulating and interesting conversation about the range of issues that we'll be looking at. So I am talking about Tommy Lee Sparta, and the way I want to start is like this. All right, so what a way to start. In this particular excerpt from one of his songs, it is clearly demonstrated that Tommy Lee Sparta is involved in the kind of contest and struggles that many a dancehall artist has had to deal with, and struggles particularly for relevance within the dancehall space. It's also clear that, at least from this extract, that Tommy Lee Sparta recognizes the importance of a number of important concepts, or a number of relevant ideas as far as relevance is concerned. He is, for example, demonstrating the fact that a dancehall artist needs to be anchored. And he's also demonstrating the fact that he's anchored to the Gaza, and he intends to rule. In one sense, it suggests to me some aspect or variant of what we know in psychology as the Oedipus complex. Of course, there's a lot more to say about that, but we have a time constraint, so I'll move to something a little bit more important. This particular paper tackles the significance of Tommy Lee Sparta and places particular emphasis on his musical output. The presentation also seeks to locate his lyrics within the framework of conflict, with particular reference to ideology and hegemony as modes of conflict. I want to note here as well that conflict is presented in tandem with resistance, and therefore conflict and resistance are engaged as impacting and retained ingredients in the cultural practice of dancehall performance and politics, through the emphasis here, of course, on his recordings. Now, one of the reasons why I'm looking at Tommy Lee Sparta is the fact that since 2010, he has been an important or significant character as far as youth culture is concerned. It is also the case that many a dancehall stakeholder have found it necessary to speak to his apparent dark or impious influence on the dancehall space and the wider Jamaican society. Now, while it is important to consider the ways in which each of these variables may have affected his relevance, my emphasis on lyrics will allow us to understand just what exactly is he contributing as a dancehall artist. Now, I want to say at this juncture that there is not much that is particularly unique about his rhyming schemes, his lyrical dexterity, or wordplay. In fact, what seems to be the magnet is the way in which he delivers what is for the most part an assortment of generally uncomplicated, perfect internal and slant rhymes. So I'm speaking to rhyme schemes there. The rhythm with which the words are delivered in each of the songs reveal a pattern or style that is uniquely his. And added to this is a particular presentation of a character. I think it seems to be frozen there. A character, albeit generally borrowed from Thomas Lee Bass, the American musician and founding member of the metal band Motley Crue, that image is being projected. No? The American musician and founding member of the metal band Motley Crue and founder of rap metal band Methods of Mayhem. Now, Bass is known for his tattoos and eccentric dressing, such as the wearing of black leather pants and accessories, and all of these are similar to Tommy Lee Sparta's approach to adornment. Now, I want to move from here to talk about the different messages that can be found in Tommy Lee Sparta's music. Now, generally speaking, there are a number of core themes in dancehall music, and these have been consistent over the past 30 years. These themes range from bodily adornment and presentation, relationships with members of the family, including parents and spouse, relationships with the immediate physical and social communities, relationships with colleagues, description, critique, or endorsement of acts of violence, hardships faced in life, issues with social and spiritual moral currency, sexual encounters, prowess and taboos, among a few others. Now, in terms of the assessment done in the preparation of this paper, 49 songs recorded by Tommy Lee were surveyed, and 80% of these songs can be limited to 3 dominant themes. These themes are: 1, the description, critique, or endorsement of acts of violence as forms of protest, self-defense, or evidence of social status; 2, sexual encounters, prowess, and taboos; and 3, relationships with colleagues, which could be or can be harmonious or dissonant. Now, if Tommy Lee is to be considered an important face and voice of a younger generation, as is claimed by his publicist and elder artists such as Bounty Killer, then it is clear that some scrutiny of this output is warranted. Now, for the most part, his dalliance with violence was directed in all instances at other masculine forces. He does not at any point sing about violence being directed at women. In fact, the demonic references seem to be directly related to this attempt at showing how psycho he is, or why, quote, them not bad like me. Songs such as Warn Them, Some Boy, Shelly Christmas, Psycho, etc. are among the classic examples from his catalog. Now, after all his foes are forewarned, start war, skip that. It just seems a little weird right now. On the other hand, Tommy Lee Sparta appears concerned with the degree of violence that exists in the country and possibly uses pre-existing violence as an excuse for being armed. So he's speaking about inheriting his ideas about violence as opposed to being a creator of violence. Now, this particular song called Graveyard does a number of things. On one hand, he seems to say, you know, people are scared, we have too much violence in the society. But at the same time, he's using that as an excuse to say, listen, me not soft like caterpillar with the Mac them, meaning I am armed for the very reason that we're in a society that has certain challenges, and listen, I'm going to protect myself. Now, similar observations were made in songs like Bloodbath, Jah Watch Over Me, as he seemed to demand protection, though he was clearly endorsing the perceived necessity for being armed. However, in another song called Journeys, he was a bit less opaque in his critique of violence. So he's not endorsing it in all instances.
Father, save my soul. Living in a world so cold. Every day is the same thing. I'm depending on my own. Every day is the same. Every day is the same. Every day is the same thing. Living in stress and pain. I no time for no war. Too much conspiracies. Circulate love and let the system set we free. Start a new life. We want life, no dead body. World without love. System set we free. Laws of life.
So one question that we must ask is, what is this system of which he speaks? This rather esoteric concept has been a part of Jamaican folk culture and popular expressions for several decades and has been used by most, if not all, artists who speak to the social, economic, or political hardships that are extant within the society in various movements. And this usage suggests either exposure to this tradition or an insight into the fact that not much have been adjusted in the past decades. And so youths are still caught in a rhythm of existence that necessitates acts of violence that require supernatural action for them to escape. Now, in this regard, Tommy Lee Sparta's endorsement of acts of violence ought to be taken seriously, not only because of his apparent prescriptive tirades, but also because of the fact that his lyrics may be describing a worldview that indicates a need for serious intervention. Songs such as Shelly Christmas indicates that violence is a form of resistance for certain groups within the society. Now, as he underscores in the recording Reality Story and Holding Out the Pressure, many young men are caught in a dilemma and have to constantly pray, in his own words, to carry out positive acts, now while being bombarded with negative influences. The latter song also speaks to the importance of his children and mother as catalysts for such positive thinking.
Holding out the pressure, trying to do the right. Some fools not go want it happen. Come and steam up a bag of vibes, but tell them be humble and I make no demon rise. Go and go looking at the mirror and wanna say,
All right. So given that I have 5 minutes, I'm not going to speak much more about this, except to say that though his recording career is still young, his expressed thoughts on violence also show a lack of engagement for possible solutions to this dilemma. In other words, he speaks to it, but he doesn't tell us how to solve it in one sense. And in this regard, his compositions lack the activism, even if this activism is contradictory, and many other artists, such as his mentor Vibes Cartel, do speak out against violence, though some may see that as being hypocritical. So even if contradictory, Tommy Lee doesn't follow suit. And that is, I think, an essential to a career that has longevity. He has to be willing to critique and be an activist at the same time. Now I want to move quickly to looking at sexual encounters, prowess, and taboos for a minute or two. Now, Tommy Lee Sparta's engagement of sexual encounter, prowess, and taboos are also unsurprising, especially given its place as one of the definitive themes of dancehall music. However, sexual encounters require compatible partners who can perform at the highest possible or to the highest possible standards, and self-praise is often the tabled recommendation. Now, his engagement of sexuality promotes the constantly challenged stereotype of heterosexual norms, visiting relationships, and abhorrence for cunnilingus and homosexual exchanges. After all, in another song, he says, "Me never go loaf in a polo." And fellatio is actually permissible. Now, male and female relationships seem to be defined by the attractive appearance of females based on their dress and ability to perform certain bodily movements, for which there is predictable weakness. And this is coupled with a deserved monetary exchange. Now, such lyrics echo the findings of the late social anthropologist Barry Evans, who documented the view that boys are taught that being able to give girls money to be a provider was part of a definition of his manhood or masculinity within the Caribbean space. And I'm making reference to the text, Learning to be a Man, by Barrington Evans. Now, I want to move from here to now speak to what systems and conflict may be associated with his music. Now, like other dancehall artists, the lyrics that are performed by Tommy Lee Sparta are often taken as a reflection of his worldview and beliefs, at least in the moments within which such songs are performed. And in this regard, it is also imperative to acknowledge the fact that his experiences are not ours. And his experiences also help to shape the issues that he chooses in a different moment to emphasize. And in this regard, it is apparent from his music that in terms of lifestyle, there is much emphasis on staying away from enemies, though one has to be constantly prepared to deal with whatever violent advances which may be imminent. All right, so I have approximately a minute, so I'm going to deal with one thing quickly. Now, Tommy Lee, apparently, based on his lyrics, exists in a world that goes against a particular script. And that script, a script that says one must regularly attend school, at least up to the secondary level, participate in school-sanctioned extracurricular activities, such as sports or service clubs, and possibly matriculate to tertiary studies and employment within the private or public sector. The reality is that many young males and females have resisted this route, and hence see themselves as being pitted against a system which advocates a state-prescribed lifestyle. They resist in search of an alternative, and the system is often also seen as a facilitator of this alternative lifestyle, though with some sanctions. In this regard, his perspective on acts of violence, sexuality and sexual expression, social and economic hardships, hustling and entrepreneurships, and personal and communal entertainment options can be seen as running counter to that which is endorsed by polite society. It challenges that which is endorsed by the state, and this may be seen, and in this regard, he may be seen as an instrument. The state, may be seen as an instrument of the ruling class of the society, which he challenges. Now, the last thing I want to do is just to sort of play one other song.
Without feeling insecure, I don't really wanna lose my life, really wanna live some more. Me want by my mother to house in a loss, I'm a sing them a short sword. I don't wanna go to jail no more, I just wanna live my life. I don't wanna be harmed or victimized, I don't wanna take your life.
So, final sentence or two. While it may be the case that he is saying, I just want to live my life, I just want to do me, I just want to do something for my mother, or so on, it is clear that in a lot of ways, he is an activist, and he represents a particular group, whether he accepts it or not. And it's also the case, as the longer version of this paper argues, that his lyrics run counter to a state-prescribed rhythm of existence, a way of life. And in this regard, he has to take much responsibility for some of the ideas that he is putting out there. I think a lot more will be said during the question and answer section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winston, for helping those of us who are of a certain generation to get into the mind of another generation. Our next presentation will be by Dr. Anna Perkins, who will be presenting on Good as Gal, Deconstructing the Virtuous Woman in Dance Hall. Now, Dr. Perkins is a former Dean of Studies at the St. Michael's Theological College. Of course, as I had said before, she's a theologian. She is currently Where do I break this now? She currently works in the Office of the Board of Undergraduate Studies in the Quality Assurance section at the University of the West Indies. And I think I should allow Dr. Perkins to come and make a presentation.
Friends, good morning. I'm continuing my interest in the intersections between dancehall and Christianity. So you already hear that in the title that I've pulled together this morning. Now, one of the best loved Bible passages that end up being used at Christian weddings in Jamaica is taken from Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31. It's often used at weddings to describe the virtues or good characteristics of a woman who is an excellent wife, the virtuous woman. Now, according to Proverbs, this woman is trustworthy, she's faithful and caring of her spouse, industrious, entrepreneurial, generous to the poor and needy, strong, worthy of honor and praise, wise and God-fearing. And of course, she has a well-respected husband. Now, this well-known image is clearly a source of influence in shaping the image of the ideal woman for many Jamaican Christians. But I think there's another image that's perhaps as powerful in the discourse around women, and that image I think is coming out of dancehall, and that's the image I'm exploring this morning, the good-ass image or the good-ass gal image. Now, this good-ass gal is considered to be good enough to be the number one woman in a man's life. When I looked up the term in the Urban Dictionary, it was used to describe a good girl who doesn't sleep around or cheat on her lover and gets what she wants through hard work or talent, not by using her body. So what I realized was that the goodess was in effect the virtuous woman in the dancehall repertoire. And the term itself seems to bear this out, as the goodess seems to connote good as gold, as good as it gets, the best, good as new, or has the goods. So the central idea is about goodness or good qualities or actions of a woman as they're identified by the male connoisseur. The goodess is often set against what I call the not goodess or the no goodess, but you hear terms like skettle and matey and so on within the dancehall context. And this is done because that helps to highlight the value of the goodess. Now, there's some similarity with the virtuous woman in Proverbs, which I find to be quite striking, as the virtuous woman in Proverbs herself is also a foil for her rival, the immoral woman. So what am I doing in this paper? I'm using the description of the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 as a kind of scaffolding. And I'm hoping to use that to help me to deconstruct the meaning of the virtuous woman in dancehall by doing an examination on the lyrics of 3 artists who extol the virtues of this woman. And what am I attempting to do? I'm attempting to answer the question that Harry Toddler poses in his track, Good as Girl. Him say, how it go? You know, and in fact, as you recognize, the title for my paper is taken from the bridge from Toddler's song. I'm also questioning why is it that the good as girl is constructed as the total opposite to and the rival of the no good as. Remember, the no good as is my term. You're not going to hear it in any of the dancehall songs that I'm going to reference, but you probably hear about the skettle or the matey. So in Tony Matterhorn's Good As for Them, he sets her up as a rival or the complete opposite of the good as. I'm also wondering about the independence that she's supposed to have, and Beanie Man extols this independence in his Good As Gal. And I'm wondering if it might not be really contradictory or maybe illusory. And then there's another image of the good as that I picked up from listening to General Levy's Good As Gal. And he talks about the good as gal trotting a righteous or cultural path. And I'm wondering how that can be reconciled with the public whining and glamorous displays that the goddess is supposed to be known for. Now, throughout this discussion, I'm taking for granted the existence of what we call the male gaze or the patriarchal gaze. Now, this is the gaze that encompasses, defines, describes, and controls the goddess gal. And I think it's important for us to foreground this because in the Jamaican context, the male gaze is actually central to understanding the role of women in society. The underlying assumption is that the woman's place, her role, and value in Jamaican society are based largely on her outward appearance. The word image of the goddess, made central in many lyrical offerings in the dance hall, is accompanied by other images in the print and visual media and in the dance hall lifestyle in general. Quote, unnoticed and unreflected upon, these images suffuse our thoughts, speech, bodily interactions with others, judgments, and ordinary practices of everyday interaction, end quote. I think it's therefore necessary to interrogate these images for their impact and challenge them when they work against the full flourishing of our bodies, ourselves, and our very being, as I believe happens in the case of the image of the goddess, and of course what I call the no goddess. Let's turn to the scriptures for a little bit. So you're in Bible study now, right? We're going to look at the virtuous woman as she shows up in the book of Proverbs. Now, in the original Hebrew in which the book of Proverbs was written, or is written, chapter 31, verses 10 to 31 is actually what we call an acrostic poem. What that means is that each line begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. You know, so how we have it in English would be A, B, C, yeah? The opening line of the poem is a rhetorical question that emphasizes the incomparable worth of this extraordinary woman. So you're all familiar with this verse. Who can find a virtuous woman? The rarity of such a find is captured in the explanation of her being more precious than rubies. This rare woman is described through activity as a wife, and that makes me ask questions, you know, does that imply that the unmarried woman is not virtuous or not valuable? Her extraordinary exploits and virtues are extolled. The virtuous wife runs a household distinguished by abundant food and clothing for everybody in her household. By trade, so she imports silk and exports finished products. Boy, you know, if Jamaica today could actually have many more of those women, we wouldn't be in the crisis that we're in right now, no? And then, of course, her husband has a great deal of renown. And what you recognize is that the renown of her husband, the status of her husband in the community, is premised on her virtue. At no point is the woman's sexuality, whether it's her prowess, her behavior, or her appeal mentioned. But her sexual propriety is perhaps implied in her faithfulness to and care of her husband. Beauty is rejected as vain, and the woman seems to me to be painted as sexless or drab. So by implication, sex and sexuality, the erotic, is undervalued or perhaps devalued in this poem coming out of Proverbs. Now, this marvelous woman is an ideal for women to strive to become and a worthy companion to be sought after by eligible bachelors. So you can see why it ends up being used at weddings and so on. Her desirable qualities are male-defined and important inasmuch as they benefit the male, providing him with respect, status, and wealth within the community. And at the same time, I can't help but feel, you know, I get the impression that most women would fall short in terms of this ideal that's being presented there. Now, follow me really quickly now to another image of a woman or women that's presented in the book of Proverbs. And we call these women the immoral women. So the book of Proverbs, as you know or you might not know, is addressed principally to young men with the intent of preparing them for life or leadership. So the book has a lot to say to the male reader or listener about women, especially immoral seductresses who prey on simpletons or fools. And I question whether it's really not men in general. But that's another story. Now, more than half of the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs issue dire warnings against the prostitute and the adulteress or the strange woman. And these are the 2 types of immoral woman who end up being denounced in the book. So the prostitute presents the obvious danger of poverty, as keeping company with prostitutes leads to you wasting your wealth. Now, although the outward danger of being with a prostitute is not as great as being with a married strange woman, a liaison with a prostitute is still dangerous. Now, the strange woman is strange because she belongs to another man, and perhaps worse yet, is a Gentile. Getting involved with a married woman presents the potential danger of poverty and despair, but there is also the danger of death at the hand of the cuckolded husband. Interestingly, Proverbs notes that the nature of the temptation presented by such women is not in their beauty or seductive appearance, rather, it is in their words. Words are the immoral woman's greatest means of seduction. Unlike her her virtuous rival speaks words of wisdom and kind words only and appears to be lacking in sexual desire or sex appeal. Now, the centrality of the power of words cannot therefore be lost upon us. And I think, Winston, you made that point in your own way in your presentation this morning. The power of the lyrical content of dancehall, therefore, cannot be gainsaid. And I think I need to run to my dancehall discourse right now. All right. So when I did my research and my analysis of the dancehall repertoire, I was bowled over by how many dancehall songs there were out there that reference this goodness. I could give you a long list, but I'm just going to give you a couple just to give you a sense of what's going on. Beanie Man has Good As Gal, General Levy has Good As Gal, and he has another one, Good As Gal. King Shadrach has Good As Gal, and there's a whole host of them. Now, what I found is that this woman was being extolled for being better than the rest, knowing what a good man is about, having soft skin, having an ever-ready body, being independent, not being involved in any legal wrangling. She's not popped down, she's good from birth, the whole works. So what you realize is that there's a lot of comparisons, things that you could compare her to the virtuous woman in the book of Proverbs, but not quite. Because what I want to argue is that the not good us or the no good us is the exact opposite of this good us, yet she often attempts to masquerade as the real deal. Yet I find that the good us is as much about her, that the good us has much about her that is similar to the immoral woman in Proverbs, and perhaps can be seen to possess the characteristics of both the virtuous and the immoral woman. She has sex appeal, she has sex prowess, she's industrious, she's independent of a sort, she has an attractive body, a charming personality, she's faithful to her partner. All of these are desirable in the goodess. Now, at the same time, there is some overlap with the description of the no goodess, as she's either a poor copy of the goodess or the exact opposite, depending on who you listen to. And I could go on to talk about it. So maybe what I'm really seeing there is that there's some kind of continuum where we start with a virtuous woman on one end and the immoral woman on the further end. And then in between you have the goodess and the no goodess. And there's a kind of shading into one and the other, you know. But somehow for me there is a sense of unreality about all of these portraits. And I go on to talk about the peculiar fixation that dancehall has with the body of the woman. I talk about the goodess versus the non-goodess. But where I want to go to is to quickly look at that final question about how it goes. And it may be too easy, I think, for us to reject the dancehall as a misogynist space, quote, that reduces women to bare essentials, mindless bodies, undressed, and on display exclusively for male sexual pleasure, end quote. Yet the lyrical word images and performances of many male dancehall artists who work out their masculinity via an ideology that dominates and oftentimes derogate the feminine other can be seen to do just that. Indeed, it can be argued that the entreaties of DJs like Toddler, Beanie Man, or Matterhorn, and female DJs like Pampute, and I'm probably not pronouncing that right, Winston, serve to normalize and legitimize beliefs and practices that value women according to their outward appearance and their sexual and economic value to the dominant, dominating male. The presence and prevalence of the goodess in the dancehall repertoire, as well as the goodess versus the non-goodess rivalry, raises several concerns, and I'll be happy to walk you through those concerns when we have our discussion later on. Oh, I have 2 minutes. I could actually run through a couple other things. All right, let me tell you a couple of the concerns that this raises for me. One, that women are constantly presented with an ideal of physical desirability, sexual prowess, virtue, economic success that they have to measure up to. We as women have to measure ourselves against these ideals, and many women fall short in one area or the other, for one reason or the other, often beyond the woman's control. Now, this, of course, can raise issues of self-worth for many a woman. Secondly, women's bodies are inevitably placed in relation to males' power over. Importance is placed on how women use their bodies. Page 17. Use their bodies. Women are not beautiful for themselves or for each other, but are to be beautiful to ensure male attention. Thirdly, women have been socialized to accept and prepare for their bodies to be on display, especially to men and, of course, to their female rivals as well. The dominant popular discourse in dancehall serves to accentuate the fact that Jamaican women, along with their Caribbean sisters, live lives of spectacle. As such, they rarely are the ones to make meaning, but more often than not are the bearers of meaning imposed by the male spectator. Quote, not only does such a system compromise women's economic power, it compromises their power of self-definition and reduces them from the role of active participant in the creation of themselves to the passive recipient of a construct that often fits them ill, if at all, end quote. Undue emphasis on the exterior denies women possession of their uniqueness, and this can only be damaging. 4, certain women are made into pariahs, as in the case of what I call the no-gooders, or others are given privileges like the gooders for looking a certain way or acquiring certain resources, much of which may be incidental or even beyond their control. The possibility therefore remains that women continue to remain the objects upon which men place meanings. 5, the independence of the desirable goddess is belied by how dependent she is on having the vaunted independence recognized by a man, oftentimes a man who praises that trait in order to avoid his responsibilities. And I'm going to stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perkins, for helping us to understand a little bit more about the good as gal, at least to know a little more about that kind of quality than the quality of academic programs. We'll now invite Megan Sylvester, who is a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of West Indies, St. Augustine, to make her presentation. But just to say that Megan is also a lecturer in sociology of music, whose work focuses on identity in the music forms of Trinidad and Tobago. And Megan will be presenting on Firebondem, exploring the language, lyrics, and sound of Trinidad and Tobago's Bunji Garland's Raga Soca music. And just to say that we're expecting our 4th panelist, Alan Bernard, to join us in a few minutes. So we'll be expecting him after Megan's presentation. Megan, please welcome her.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me? Yes? I will be looking at, as the moderator indicated, Firebun lyrics specifically coming out of the Raga Soca music of Trinidad and Tobago. The aim, I'm looking at the period 2001 to 2011, spanning the music of Bunji Garlin, who is the main Raga Soca artist in Trinidad and Tobago. The aim of this investigation will be to identify the extent to which the fire lyrics are born out of a desire to address the following: the social and economic imbalance in society brought about by the policies of the successive political regimes, the growing disquiet among today's youth as they fall prey to the illusions of bling, and the decline of the moral compass as social crimes are perpetuated in even larger numbers against fellow citizens. Okay, so we start off with saying we're going to be talking about Bunji Garlin. So who is Bunji Garlin? Bunji Garlin is a composer and a performer of soca and raga soca music. He sees himself as a lyrics king, and he performs both in his home country and abroad. So in the off-season, out of Carnival, he also tours Europe. And this raga soca music, let's just get a little bit into this. What is raga soca music? Raga soca music is a blending of Jamaican-type chanting rhythms with regular soca music to develop a sort of fusion or a hybrid sound, and we're going to be hearing the different aspects of this raga soca music coming out. This type of music burst onto the scene approximately 10 years ago with the advent of the dub calypso sampling and later songs by artists such as Machel Montano, where he would have paired his music with Shaggy, Red Rat, Beanie Man, and later on Collie Buddz. These early mixed music recordings have given way today to further hybrids, where major artists like Bunji Garlin and other members of his Asylum band are the main proponents of this genre, with ancillary performances by other artists such as Benjai. I wanted to now to speak to some of his accomplishments, because if we're saying we're looking at this person as the main proponent, what is it that he has done that makes him, worthy of research? He was the first Raga Soca king of Trinidad and Tobago with a particular song called Send That Rhythm Crazy, which really mixed the dancehall and the soca. He has won the International Soca Monarch in 2002, 2004, 2005, and 2008. The TSCT People's Choice Award in 2005, Raga Soca Monarch in 2000 and 2001, and the Young King in 2001. And he has also won the International Soca Monarch competition several years with songs like In the Ghetto, Warrior Cry, Blaze the Fire, and Fiery. And he has continued to release music all up until this year, 2013. Now, I want to actually give you a sense of the titles of the songs, because if we're saying we're looking at fire songs, what is the whole issue about fire? Fire songs really imply songs either with a title or the lyrics which speak to admonishing Babylonian traits of behavior with fireburn sentiment. So we're seeing that element coming directly out of this conscious music coming out of Jamaica, as well as the dancehall music. So he has songs entitled Licks, Right Now, Blaze the Fire, Fireman, Burn a Fire, Fiery, and Hold a Burn. So we're getting the fire titles coming out there. And when I play the music, you're going to get a song of an idea of what is happening. But let me just touch on the link between the languaging of Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. In both Trinidad and Jamaica, an English lexicon Creole is spoken alongside an emerging local standard. Creole, therefore, continues to be a vibrant sort of language in the Anglophone Caribbean, and it's part and parcel of what we speak in the Caribbean. Jamaica and Trinidad would be classified as belonging to the outer circle, which represents post-colonial Anglophone context, where the localized norm has well-established linguistic and cultural identity. Raga Soca artists of Trinidad and Tobago innovate using Jamaica Creole English instead of Trinidad Creole English in systematic ways to negotiate and index specific experiences and identity triggers inimical to the Afro-Trinidadian underclass. The use of the Jamaica Creole English for the purpose of identity work has been well documented in migrant and diasporic communities, Rastafarian communities outside of Jamaica, and adolescent speech. With regard to the spread of Rastafarianism and dread talk, the distinctive manner in which Rastafarians speak identifies two modes for the spread of this cultural movement and its linguistic artifacts through migration, travel, and through music. That's where we see it the most. These modes are not exclusive to each other, nor are they only applicable to Rastafarianism and dread talk. Rather, they can be expanded to include the spread of Jamaica Creole English in general. Indeed, music, both reggae and its offshoot dancehall, has been instrumental in spreading Jamaica Creole English across the Caribbean and indeed across the world. Central themes to Rastafarian ideology and by extension, reggae music, appeals to equality and justice. For this reason, reggae and Rastafarianism have attracted oppressed and socially displaced people around the globe. Jamaican dancehall also serves a similar function in providing marginalized sections of the population with a voice. And this is the basic issue of why a Trinidadian soca artist has decided to infuse Jamaican Creole English and all its attendant themes within a new music, a new subgenre of soca dubbed Raga Soca. All right? So now I'm just going to play some songs, and I hope that you're able to get a sense of.
Hey, it's Callan, the fire chief, is bringing the flamestone from now to the hill. Hey, I'm the fireman, fire's in my hand, raging through the land. I want you to bless the fire, show me your lighters so nice, put the lighters up in the air, keep the fire now and just bless the fire, show me them lighters tonight, put the lighters up.
So we see the whole imagery there of the lighters and blazing the fire actually being used in the song. All right, so now we see another song, and the name of this is Fireman. Again, the fire lyrics.
Show me red flag,
All right, so the lyrics say, show them red flag, give me red flag, we're going to burn them out. Again, we're seeing the whole issue of the fire and burning them out. And this, as we said earlier, this is about burning out the Babylonian negativity of society. The name of this song is Burn a Fire. So he has actually paired with Prophet Benjamin, another soca artist in Trinidad, for this particular song. All right, so we're hearing again that theme coming out. We're going to another song. The name of the song is Fiery. We have the sirens. We're getting a sense of, yeah? All right, so we get a sense of what Bunji Garlin is trying to do, and as I said, it's important for us to understand basically how this artist sees himself. He asserts his role as the fire chief out to blaze all social offenders and offenses coming out. Now, as I come closer to a conclusion, we see that it is very important to understand the necessity of this type of fusion music coming from Trinidad and Tobago. What Bunji Garlin does is he utilizes the freestyle posturing of the hip-hop lyricist, the spitting into the mic of the rap genre, and the political and social questioning and commentary of the calypso art form, and the spontaneous delivery of biting lyrics of the ex-tempo artist, which is the music that comes out or emanates out of calypso. It's mother music, and the Chandong Babylon demeanor and stagecraft of the reggae and dancehall performer. Now, further to that, calypso is the precursor to soca, and it has played an important part in the Trinbagonian society as a cultural form of social commentary. Since the rise in popularity of soca music in the 1980s, there has been an ongoing debate in the nation and abroad over the differences, lyrically and otherwise, between calypso and soca. Recently, in the genre of soca music, there has been an increase in more sexually explicit lyrics. Many traditional calypso enthusiasts bemoan the fact that young soca artists seem to lack the verbal and lyrical skills, which have been always an important component of calypso. But there has been a change. In walks Bunji Garlin. Male soca artists such as Bunji Garlin also carry on the tradition of the male calypsonian who brags of sexual prowess. However, Garlin garners a tremendous amount of respect amongst his audiences as he tells it like it is. That is, he is explicit not only in terms of celebrating sexuality, but also because he addresses the themes of sexual abuse as well as describes the harshness of ghetto life. The daily reality for an increasingly large number of Trinbagonians and Caribbean diasporic youth, for example, we're from the ghetto, Garlin, along with a few other contemporary soca artists such as Maximus Dan, is not afraid to address themes of sexual violence and the commodification of sexuality. That is the rising number of women and men who are willing to sell their bodies, as you would have been mentioning in your paper. According to Gordon Rolea, a major proponent treating with calypso and its impact on the society of Trinidad and Tobago, the influence of Jamaican reggae, dub, dancehall, and calypso music was an unmasking in which sex was unequivocally represented as sex and violence as violence. Resulting in a plainer, less subtle, and at times almost witless hybrid that has dominated the airwaves between the mid-1980s up to 1990. Artists such as Bunji Garlin, who seem to be attempting to combine classical components of calypso with traditional dancehall styles, is doing it in a more lyrically creative way. For example, some of the components of dancehall music that we see in soca music are desired to speak to the massive. That is, lyrically speaking, dancehall is aimed towards a particular constituency, the most disenfranchised element of society. It is not meant for a global audience, nor is it meant for the local elites. For example, the language used in Jamaican dancehall has been deemed to be offensive to upper-class Jamaicans, as Annie Paul would have noted. Bunji Garlin started off as a dancehall performer in Trinidad, and his lyrical phrasing is very indicative of this. The directness of his lyrics is also reflective of the dancehall influence, as is his adoption of a partial Jamaican accent and Jamaican terms, or languaging. In 1999, when he first emerged on the scene, he said that Raga Soca is singing soca with a little bit of Jamaican accent, but with a soca melody, like what he likes to sing. What is interesting, though, is that Garland combines both the bluntness of dancehall and his description of ghetto life with the calypso tradition of social commentary and frames it within soca beats that are popular with the youth in and out of the carnival season. In terms of sexuality, Garland and other soca performers have not been afraid to address issues of rape, child abuse, prostitution, and pornography, not only in relation to the abuse of women, but also to the abuse of men. In this way, he addresses both sex and violence, and sex as violence, in ways that are harsh, yes, but unfortunately, perhaps reflecting of a new reality in the tradition of the true calypso as social commentary simply cannot be ignored. And to end, basically what we're seeing is in these Fireband lyrics, Bunji Garlin as a soca artist has been able to transcend this concept that soca music is only about wine and jam. As we identify the lyrics and we listen to the themes, we see that he has gone beyond that and taken it back to the tradition of calypso, the foundation music that soca would have emerged from. So we see that there's that tying and that link there. All right, so that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Megan, for telling us that soca is not just about whining and jamming, that it's also about fire burning. I'd like to pause for a moment to welcome Dr. Donna Hope, the Director of the the Institute for Caribbean Studies and the Reggae Studies Unit, who has graced us with her presence. Welcome, Donna. We'll now call on Mr. Alan Bernard, who says he's simply Alan Bernard, to tell us about not bowing, nah bow, can't bow, won't bow, oral sex and the dance hall. Very interesting title. Let's see what gives. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I can't. No. Okay. Let me thank Dana. I mean, I didn't know if Dana wouldn't be here, you know. I never knew that the abstract was actually a part of the presentation. And Dana consulted and ensured that I am here. Now, this particular presentation really is based on some ideas that I have been looking at since 2003. Myself and Ragashanti at the time were teaching a course on dancehall here. And we started to look things through some ideas. And we came up with some kind of problematic in the sense that we were saying these things should be discussed, they are not being discussed. What is happening? I mean, it's a big elephant in a room, let us talk about them. And so we began to talk about them. However, it was Cecil Gutsmore, who I consider to be one of the most fearless academics, that actually said to me, Alan, you need to put this thing down and look seriously on exploring the issue. The paper is entitled Nambo, Kiambo, Wambo, and it tries to chronicle oral sex in dancehall. It has to do with the music for the most part, listening to the music, different times, different era in the evolution of the space we call dancehall. It also has to do with a couple of interactions and interviews conducted. I must say at this point, though, that the interviews conducted were actually with people who know me or people who I know, and so there might be some kind of room there to talk to other people generally. Given the nature of the issue, you want to ensure that those who you're talking with are clear on what you're trying to do. People wouldn't talk about issues relating to oral sex, particularly in dancehall. So that's the genesis of this research. and it is still a work in progress. Can I see the hands of all those who attended Fame FM, Lipstick and Lollipop? No? Nobody? That was actually last night. Fame FM had this big promotion, this magnificent party of Valentine's Day. It was called Lipstick and Lollipop. And I thought, opportune, you know? But this is what is happening. The abstract would outline really, there's a proliferation in sexual, oral sex innuendos, in dancehall these days. And they're accepted, not accepted, but they're tolerated far more than they used to be when I was growing up as a young man who loved dancehall and attend every pan that knocks. The terms that I use, the colloquial terms, really say how it is that I characterize that particular period in dancehall culture. And the period that is characterized by nah, meaning I am not going to, a categorical statement that I am not, nay, I will never. So dancehall had that kind of an approach in its early stages to the issue of oral sex, both in its lyrical content and in the views of those who participated in the space. And I'm going to use Kingsley's, Dr. Stewart's term. Dr. Stewart categorized the different ways of interacting with dancehall as in the peripheral, the intermediate, and the core. I'm speaking to core, meaning the people like myself who walk, talk, live, eat, drink dancehall. Know every dancehall song, go every dancehall session. So in the initial stages, I'm suggesting that this not going to, this categorical statement of will never do, was characteristic of not only the music that comes out of the space, but also the views and the values that were held by the core participants. However, during this phase of nah, there were signs that some things were changing, or we didn't sufficiently understood certain things. At this time, we're talking about early 90s. There was a particular artist, his name was Stumpy. I'm not sure if Donna remember this artist, you might not, but he used to be a part of Capleton's group. And Stumpy did this song in a time when we were saying no, categorically no. And let me quote the song. And I'm suspecting that I can't just say anything, Donna, if I'm quoting a song, yes. And this is the line I'm going to quote from Stumpy's song in this time when it was categorical. Stumpy says, you think a Risto girl alone a suck cock, you have some girl a suck cock and still a go on like a notch. What this means is that during this time when we were saying, the music was saying, and the values that were shared were saying, no, here comes Stumpy. Not one of the mainstream artists, but he was highlighting us to the fact that prior to now, these kind of activities were relegated to a particular social grouping. But Stumpy was saying, no, it is not only the aristocrat, which is Risto. Yeah? Risto. It's not only Risto. You have plenty of those who are core participants, who are engaging and still pretending to be top notch, you get that one. So that was the first, in terms of us listening to the music and trying to assess what was taking place. That was the first sign. Some of the values were actually shifting, or we just never know about it, or were not fully aware. Then we move into the can't. So now it was categorical. We're not going to. No way, no how, no where, by who, it doesn't really matter. Then we move into the can't, which takes us now into the late 90s and early 2000s. Now the can't, which means you cannot. The you cannot is now saying, it never say you don't want to, It is saying, no, you cannot. You cannot because you still have those constraints. Those societal might be, those dancehall constraints, those limitations were placed on you. So even though you could if you wanted to, because of the constraints, you can't do it. This is where you start now to hear some artists begin to experiment with the content. And I think the most glaring, well, the first one that I made note of was from Tanya Stevens. And Tanya Stevens' song, She Love When the Freaks Them A Blow Around the Corner. So Tanya experimented with the content, but I thought that Tanya was in for a rude awakening because she came to Reggae Sumfest. I don't remember the dates, but I was there. I never missed a Reggae Sumfest. She came to Reggae Sumfest, performed that song, got booed. Because we, the audience, were not ready for that content. So that never went anywhere. Cecile came in that time as well with her song, Do It To Me, and was rejected flatly. Mad Andrew suffered. Mad Andrew was another dancehall artist who was at that time in a relationship with Cecile, and he suffered. Cecile never mentioned his name, but that was how we treat with the issue. He suffered, his career just vanishes. Now, there is a gender issue here in this phase because Baby Sham came in this phase. Which girl? Now, Baby Sham wasn't rejected flatly, but females loved the song. The males began to look at it and say, okay, something is there. So there must be a gender thing there. I think Dana can better flesh that out. We can sit and talk about it. But those are the songs that dominated, and again, others were coming up. But during this time, this was when I did my first empirical kind of approach to the thing. And I start now to talk to a lot of the people I know in the space and ask them about their views on the issues. The first point I want to raise from this quick and dirty study that I did, the females would respond to the questions by saying, it's their business. It's their business. Anybody who wants to engage, it's their business. The males the males still had this view that no. But when I came down to when I come to the third phase, you will see that no started to change. It's no if I am the person providing the service. That was the male view in the third phase. But when we're talking to youngsters, core participants in the dance hall, during the second phase of cannot, when you had songs beginning to experiment with the topic, you find that the females were more tolerant and were saying, whatever, it's big people, their business, they do what they want to do. The males would still say, no, but we're not as categorical as they were before because there was something in Baby Sham's song. Baby Sham was giving credence to something and saying some things that they like. The third phase, want. Want is want to. The music now is reflecting want to. We have no problem. However, the constraints are still there. They have not gone anywhere. When we speak with both males and females, females were more open. The males at this point would say, yes, if it's being done to me. So Kingsley and I had this saying that there is this oral sex theory going around, providing service to everybody. Because everybody we asked, they did not do it, but they had it done to them. Very, very, I was saying, okay, obviously something is in something. Now, I think we all know that People Like Vibes Cartel would have come up in this third phase and would have been playing a vital role in not only his music, but even in his own actions. But Cartel has never, ever, ever said that he had provided the services. I'm looking at this time thing. I have a whole heap of empirical information to run through, but I'm not going to run through them. I'm just going to say a couple of things quickly. And it is, where are we now? The first time I held a focus group session speaking to my peers about this topic, everyone enjoyed the conversation at the time. And the question that they were putting to me, when are you going to look at the issue of homosexuality? in dancehall. Pretty much the way you're looking at oral sex in dancehall now. I could not respond. Is it that we are becoming, a bit more liberal, mature jurisdiction, they call it? Is it that we are becoming more tolerant or acceptant? I couldn't respond to the issue of where we're going because for them, the next logical step is for me to address or try to address homosexuality in dancehall culture. The jury is still out on that. I have not decided on that one way or the other. Specifically as it relates to this issue, there is a serious gender component. Females, and again, when we talk to the females in the latest iteration of our quick and dirty study, the females are content with keeping the secret of the male. So the females will say, yes, we encourage our boyfriends or husbands, whoever, to participate, but we'll keep their secret to ensure that they do it. Interestingly, in the last series of discussions we had with youngsters, the males have said to us that we say to females that we do it. But in truth and in fact, we do not. We just say it because we know that is what the females want to hear and that will strengthen our position. That's what the view that the males hold currently. So they'll say to females, yes, ma'am, our thing, we're into this. Because they know the females want to hear that and the females will be more accommodating to them. But they really don't. So I said to them, okay, so when you say you do it and then you start engaging, do not do it, what happened? We don't care after that. We get what we want already. That's how some of the males are still treating. So you'll find a number, I don't know, I'm telling you what the research is saying. And the majority, the overwhelming majority of the men in dancehall that I speak to are saying that no, they don't participate, but they will say to females they do because we want to engage those youngsters. I said my time up, but I just ended one, I think, an important observation I made at the last Reggae Sumfest. Shabba Rankin is my dancehall artist, and Shabba Rankin was at Reggae Sumfest, and as we say, he shelled the place. Shabba performed and put every other artist to shame. Shabba performed every single one of his classical songs except Dembow.
Thank you very much, Alan, for that stimulating presentation. No pun intended. All right, thank you very much, panelists. At this point, I think we have just about 10 minutes of interaction with the panelists on the various themes that they have presented us with. I think we got a rich and multi-textured set of presentations that we could mine a lot of information from. The panelists are here. They'll respond to questions. The microphone in the aisle. If you have a question, you step forward, I'll acknowledge you, and you can direct your question to the panelist or panelists at the table. Anyone ready with a question? Well, I will start off. And go right ahead. Thanks for sparing me.
Good morning. I'd like to just ask about the in-between phase, as in, you never mentioned the area about the licky back phase. Because that was a serious time in the dance where you had probably somebody that was indulging in oral sex as your friend. And then it started to trickle down to the acceptance of it. So that's really my question.
More of a statement than a question. Thank you very much for that. That whole second phase that I mentioned, that's the phase they're talking about. And maybe, I actually never looked at that, but maybe that is one of the reasons it began to take on, different flavor. People start to accept more. There are other issues that I've discovered from going through And I think one of them has to do with really our access to information. Our access to information in this second to third phase, caused a lot of our values to change somewhat. We were now engaging with other behavioral patterns, via the different communication mechanisms that we have. I think that's a huge one. One of the things that we haven't been paying much attention to, but I think some people are, because I hear Agri Irons mention it earlier, is really bootleg DVDs. I know easy it is to access certain material now. And a lot of that really come up in that second moving into the final phase. So I take your point, and that might well be one of the reasons why it started to get more popular, prominent, and people started to accept it more. But I think what we found was really people access to information and all sort of material,
Yes, thanks for that provocative presentation. What I hear you describing, though, is deception. And I wonder whether you think there was ever a period of honesty about sexual matters in the dancehall space. I won't go into the reggae space when at one time, no disrespect, but at one time having a Caucasian partner was considered to be taboo because we were all Pan-Africanists, until some of us started traveling to Miami and realizing that the people who were espousing those values in Jamaica were hanging out exclusively with Caucasians abroad. So is there any honesty, including the people who you say to you, brethren, when I want a girl, I tell her, say I do it, but I don't really do it. On what basis do you believe that they are being honest with you if they are prepared to do that to a woman?
Even though you say we don't want to look at the reggae, but I agree with you. To some extent, a lot of people will kind of put the truth in a straitjacket, so when it's convenient to them. I really have to tell you what the youngsters said to me, and that's what they said to me, and to some extent we were able to validate, but not to the extent that would be empirically sound, because this was really a quick and dirty approach. As I said, the people I talk to, really people who I know and people who know me, because of the very nature of the topic. We were looking at words and our expletives and trying to come up with the genesis of many of these expletives. All of those clot words, those blood, all those clot words. And somebody was trying to make connection with those clot words and how this issue became taboo. So it stretches back. Clinton and I listened to some music from way back, and the issues were being articulated in it, in some of the soca and some of the calypso. And it was it was negative in the dancehall reggae, but in the soca calypso it was more, playing on words and making fun and being more acceptable. My point is, I honestly believe that a lot of what is happening, I don't think it's deception. I think it's really we are not fully satisfied that we have reached a stage where we can say without repercussions. And so we're trying to prevent or safeguard against the repercussions. So yes, it might be disingenuous, and it just might be deceptive, but I'm not sure if the guys or girls really go out of them way to deceive, but really trying to ensure that the timing is better. I mean, Christopher Martin hasn't received the feedback or the backlash that Madandra received. So maybe we're getting closer. When and if people don't understand it, well, Cecile do it to me. She was at that time with Madandro. His career was already ended. But Christopher Martin has not been receiving any of that backlash. So maybe we're getting closer. There are, I think, Vybz Kartel as a singular artist. And now I think Conscience is trying to probably articulate the same. As a singular artist, have to some extent provided some amount of liberation for females. I can't identify any artist that has provided the same for the males, because we still have this gender dynamic relation to how we participate in terms of sex and sexuality. So, but I wouldn't go as far as say deception. I would say disingenuous. I think them really trying, they're not confident that the time is right for us to come out and say certain things about our sexuality. We have not progressed that far. And pretty much as we have outlined, we have progressed with other taboo issues. This might be one of them. But everybody seems to be more concerned is with how are we progressing with the issue of homosexuality. That's what I found in the present. People kind of move away from this topic and want to know how have we progressed where homosexuality is concerned in dancehall.
I want to make a follow-up point to something that Alan spoke to just now. The role of a vibes cartel in possibly enabling the females. And there may be an emerging trend where females are also enabling the males, are helping them to be a bit more honest. I point to a take, if you would, on Vibes Cartel's Freaky Girl Part 3, where Tiana redid the song as Freaky Man. And there are several other females who are now, especially last year into this year, they're exploring that, and maybe they're hoping for the same effect, where men may be now a little bit more honest, if you would, in the way that Cartel got women to be more accepting. So maybe the role in terms of men coming forward, that the women may have to be the enabler, and maybe they're attempting to be.
I don't think Tiana will do it. It will take much more than Tiana. Let me go back to Reggae Sumfest. Yeah, let me come back to be brief. Let me go back to Reggae Sumfest. When one of the issues in Reggae Sumfest was Cargo and his request for a threesome. And it was Lady Saw who came on stage and really put the argument to rest. When Lady Saw said, yes, you know, me go give Cargo the threesome, but she's going to sit in his face. You know? I don't think the liberation for male, it's for them to come out. You know, I'm not seeing where that is apparent or becoming apparent. It's still that this gender issue is astronomical when it comes to dancehall, has always been, and I think will be. So the liberation will take a little while, and it will take more than Tiana. I don't know if Tiana is anyway.
All right, I want to broaden the discussion a little bit. Any other interventions? If not, then I'll ask Dr. Perkins a question that came while she was to me while she was making her presentation. Why did you choose the book of Proverbs to frame your analysis of the Good as Gal in dancehall? What relevance is it to the Jamaican context to have that import in your presentation?
Thanks, Dr. Lewis. Well, I think it kind of forced itself on me. I have a very strong interest in the body and how the body gets deployed, both in Christianity and then, of course, how it gets deployed in dancehall. And we know that there's a lot of sort of intersections between the two. So once I started to encounter this good-as figure, this good-as image in the music, I immediately thought of the virtuous woman in Proverbs, because some similarities jumped out. The independence of the woman, her industriousness, you know, how she was faithful to one man. And these were some characteristics that were coming out when I was looking at the good-as image. So it was kind of a natural fit. And then as I did the research more to recognize that the good woman in Proverbs had a bad woman, and then there was a similar good woman versus bad woman motif in dancehall, and then to recognize that it was a lot more complex than just her having good characteristics and the other one having bad characteristics, but that there were some significant intersections that problematized quite a bit the image. So a good-as really is not a virtuous woman in the way that she is in Proverbs. She's more than. She's actually also a little bit of the moral woman as well. And so for me, that's very, very interesting. So yeah, it was a natural sort of outgrowth of the research itself.
Thanks. Any questions? Any other questions? Comments? All right, I have one more. Megan and Mr. Edwards. Your intervention spoke in a certain sense to the fusion element of dancehall. There's the goth element, I think, with Tommy Lee on this side, and then there's the dancehall reggae, soca blend happening with Bunji's music. Could you perhaps give us some kind of, both of you, some kind of further analysis of what import this kind of fusion has with the one on this side, the youth culture? Why is it important for youth to have this kind of fusion? And two, why is Jamaica so important as a place from which to pull in the Trinidadian context? I'll give Megan the go now.
All right, thank you for the question. It's interesting, as I was mentioning, the whole imaging and the themes that would come out in reggae and Rastafarianism, the appeal to the oppressed and the appeal to the youth and to look forward to something better. That is actually one of the main elements that would be coming out in the dancehall music, in the reggae music and in the dancehall music that Bunji borrows from the Jamaican music space to appeal to youth within Trinidad and Tobago. And what is Jamaica, because of the proximity, there are these two islands in the Caribbean that have this music industry that is a little more advanced than other islands in the Caribbean. So there is that symbiotic relationship taking place between the two islands, also taking it all the way back to Mento and the role of Lerlin Lyle Tate and his contribution to music in terms of Jamaica. So there has been that relationship, and it just continues today. And further to that, they actually, when we look at the use of Jamaica Creole English versus Trinidad Creole English, we realize that there isn't actually the same connotation in the language in Trinidad for Bunji to use to get the same ideas across. So when he says fire bun, it conveys a particular element and a particular aspect of what needs to be done to go against Babylon that cannot be replicated in some of the languaging. Of course, you could find a series of words, a series of sentences, a series of phrases to use within the Trinidad Creole English, but that, iconic theme just comes out, and I think that that is what really appeals. You mentioned about the youth. The youth, because of the cultural, imperialism that has taken place in terms of Jamaican music, and it's not a negative thing at all. Actually, it has spread across the Caribbean, and it has had a significant impact on the youth of Trinidad and Tobago. So that Bunji now is tapping into that, knowing that in the post-carnival phase, I don't know if many of you are aware, there's a lot of Jamaican music that is played on the airwaves of Trinidad radio stations, and as a result, he's tapping into that the youth will understand, merging what is indigenous to Trinidad, the soca, and blending it with that is also a part of what is important to them. Yeah? Okay.
If I understand the question correctly, it's really looking at why goth and with what effects and so on. Well, youth. Youth is a problematic thing for me personally, as far as, artists such as Tamale is concerned. I know that even other dancehall artists would say, his fan base is the youth. It's problematic for me because of what I observe at a live show such as, say, Sting or a Sumfest, where adults are in fact appear to enjoy his performances. So youth may not be teenagers only in that regard. Having said this, popular culture is driven by a number of things, including experimentation. It's one of the reasons why popular culture is interesting, on a global scale. And I think with Tamale, Sparta, there is this move to experiment as well, to bring something new to the table, maybe to ensure relevance, maybe to distinguish oneself within what is largely a competitive environment. Outside of that, the paper that I presented, the longer version, actually explores something that I call the winning formula, where I'm questioning why is it that some artists are able to maintain relevance while other artists seem to search forever to break into the mainstream, so to speak, to bust, and never seem to make it. What is it that they're lacking? What is the formula that is needed? And I think with Tommy Lee, he presents something in terms of style that is unique. And in this regard, he's able to capture the attention of youth, whatever that may be, but also industry players, serious industry players. I mean, he has a management team which a lot of artists don't have. You know, he has people who are speaking on his behalf. He's not a very eloquent person, but he has persons who can articulate a perspective about him and his music. So the goth culture is important for the fact that it's pop culture, it's experimentation, it's a way of distinguishing him, making himself distinct, but it's also a way of, it's one aspect I think of the winning formula, and he's sort of exploring that. The last thing I probably should say is that it's interesting that this goth thing wasn't really being said about him in 2010 or 2011. It's really last year, and as the paper showed, he has been recording and has been known since 2010 within dancehall circles.
All right, thank you very much, audience, for your engagement. Thank you, panelists, for presenting such lucid papers to us this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and have fun for the rest of the day.